Have you ever heard a voice that foretells your doom? I still remember that fateful night when everything changed, when an ancient radio began speaking secrets of a destiny too ghastly to ignore. I was alone in my small, creaking apartment on the outskirts of a forgotten town, a place where the wind whispered warnings through the broken windows and shadows danced in the corners. The radio had been an odd inheritance from my late uncle, a battered relic with dials that seemed to twist on their own, as if possessed by memories from another time. I had never cared much for the old things in his attic, dismissing them as nostalgic clutter, until that night when the unexplainable began to unravel. It started subtly. I was sitting in my armchair, reading an outdated mystery novel, when the radio crackled unexpectedly. A deep, guttural hum filled the room, a sound that vibrated in my bones. The volume was low, but as I listened, the hum morphed into an eerie broadcast. A voice, distorted and distant, recited a series of numbers and names, followed by an ominous warning. The time has come. Fate is sealed. At first, I assumed it was a malfunction, a stray signal from a far-off station. Yet the message was too precise, too laden with foreboding. Every word resonated with an intensity that made my heart race and my skin crawl. The room seemed to darken, and for a moment, I thought I could see faint silhouettes moving in the corners. I tried to turn the radio off, but its knobs resisted my attempts, twisting as if guided by an unseen hand. The voice returned, now softer, almost hypnotic, whispering in a language I couldn't understand, and yet somehow, I knew every word was meant for me. Over the next few days the phone rang incessantly, but no one ever answered. I found myself drawn to the radio, unable to resist its call. It was as if the device was a portal to another realm, a bridge between life and a dark, predestined fate. Each night, the broadcast grew more vivid, painting a chilling tableau of impending disasters. A bridge collapsing, a man falling from a rooftop, a tree splitting in half, and the most terrifying of all, a figure that bore an uncanny resemblance to me staring out from the darkness with eyes that burned with unholy fire. I began to see shadows where there were none, hear faint whispers in empty corridors, and feel an ever-growing chill that seeped into my very soul. My sleep was haunted by visions of twisted landscapes and spectral figures, their faces contorted in silent agony. The radio had become my tormentor, its incessant warnings etching dread into every corner of my existence. I found myself pacing my apartment at night, desperate to escape the relentless march of fate that the voice heralded. One particularly stormy evening, the air charged with electricity and fear, I decided to confront the phenomenon head-on. I clutched a flashlight and approached the radio with trembling hands. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking under the weight of terror. The device emitted a long drawn-out sigh, as if exhaling centuries of sorrow. Then, as lightning illuminated the room in stark, jagged bursts, the voice replied, this time clear, raw, and intimately personal, "You have been chosen." The revelation struck me like a bolt. Chosen for what? To be a prophet of doom? I was no savior. I was merely a man haunted by an impossible destiny. The radio's dials spun wildly and images flashed before my eyes. A future drenched in blood, cities reduced to rubble, and my own face contorted in despair. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath as the echoes of that final pronouncement reverberated through my mind. In the days that followed, my every moment was steeped in dread. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was orchestrating events around me. I started to notice coincidences that defied logic, a series of accidents that mirrored the radio's cryptic forecasts. The world outside seemed to be unraveling, as if the fabric of reality itself was fraying. Late at night, I would hear disembodied laughter and soft footsteps in the corridors of my building, and sometimes, the radio would emit a single word that sent shivers down my spine: return. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I began investigating my uncle's past, poring over old journals and dusty records. I discovered that he had been involved in occult studies, obsessed with predicting the future through devices he called oracles. According to his scribbled notes, the radio was no ordinary appliance. It was a conduit for prophetic visions, a cursed instrument built during a time of war and despair. It had passed through many hands over the decades, leaving a trail of tragedy and madness in its wake. Each owner had met a gruesome end, their lives snuffed out as if the radio's predictions were inevitable. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that my fate was entwined with that of the accursed radio. It wasn't just broadcasting disasters, it was rewriting them, creating a narrative where every person was a character doomed to play a part in a macabre prophecy. I found myself drawn into a labyrinth of secrets, where every turn led to more questions than answers. Was I merely a passive observer, Or was I an unwitting accomplice to a dark force that manipulated destiny itself? Late one night, as I sat hunched over my uncle's faded manuscripts in the dim light of my study, I heard a sudden clatter from the living room. I rushed out to find the radio now glowing with an unnatural luminescence, its surface etched with shifting symbols that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. The voice spoke again, softer this time, yet imbued with an urgency that chilled me to the core. The prophecy is nearing completion. The final act is upon you. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The room filled with a cacophony of sounds, the relentless drumming of the rain against the windows, the creak of the floorboards under unseen weight, and a low resonant hum that vibrated in my chest. I felt as if I were standing at the precipice of an abyss, the boundary between sanity and madness blurring with every heartbeat. Desperate to break free from this relentless cycle, I attempted to destroy the radio. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox and struck it with all my might, but the blow bounced off the surface as if it were shielded by an invisible force. Instead of shattering, the radio's glow intensified, and the symbols burned into my vision. I heard a new voice, so close yet impossibly distant, whispering secrets of a forgotten past and a future drenched in terror. It was the voice of my uncle, or perhaps something else entirely, guiding me toward an unimaginable truth. As the nights bled into days, my reality began to fracture. I experienced episodes where I'd lose time, waking up in unfamiliar places with no recollection of how I got there. In these blackouts, I witnessed surreal landscapes, cities swallowed by fog, forests where the trees seemed to reach out with skeletal fingers, and an endless sea of darkness punctuated by the distant echo of a radio broadcast. I realized with dawning horror that the radio was not just predicting events, it was crafting them, rewriting reality in its own horrific image. One evening, as I walked through the deserted streets, I encountered a group of people gathered around a flickering street lamp. Their eyes were wide with terror, and they whispered frantically about the chosen one and the coming reckoning. A cold dread washed over me as I recognized their voices from my own nightmares. They were the previous victims of the radio's curse, doomed to wander as specters of their former selves. In a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face among them, a face that was unmistakably mine, yet twisted with pain and despair. It was as if I were staring into a mirror that reflected not who I was, but what I was destined to become. My mind spun with confusion and fear. Was I trapped in a loop of predestined doom? Was every moment, every choice, already scripted by an unseen hand? The more I tried to understand, the more I felt the pull of an inexorable fate that I could neither escape nor alter. The radio's voice continued to haunt me day and night, its messages growing ever more personal and terrifying. I began to see cryptic symbols etched in the condensation on my bathroom mirror, hear the faint hum of its broadcast in the rustling of the wind, and feel a spectral presence in the stillness of my room. Then, on a night heavy with a sense of impending collapse, the inevitable happened. I was asleep when I was awoken by a shattering crash. I bolted upright to find my apartment engulfed in a surreal, pulsating glow. The radio had transformed into something unrecognizable, a monolithic device emitting beams of light that carved eerie patterns across the walls. In the center of this luminescence, I saw a vision of my future, a montage of calamities, a collapsing building, blood-stained hands reaching out, and a solitary figure in the distance, standing atop a pile of shattered dreams. And then, amidst the chaos, I saw myself, older, broken, and despairing, facing a crowd of silent, accusing faces. It was the moment of reckoning. The radio's final broadcast had arrived, and with it, the revelation that I was not a mere victim but a harbinger of destruction. Every twist of fate, every misfortune that had befallen those before me, was a precursor to the final act, a sacrificial play in which I was both the instrument and the author of my own demise. The truth was too monstrous to accept. I had been chosen to usher in a new era of terror, a cycle of prophecies that would never cease until I fulfilled a destiny written in blood. In that climactic moment, a surge of adrenaline and despair coursed through me. I fled my apartment, my mind reeling with the realization that every step I took was leading me deeper into a labyrinth of horror. The streets, once familiar, had become a maze of flickering streetlights and echoing footsteps, as if the city itself were conspiring to trap me in its sinister embrace. I could hear the radio's voice echoing in my ears, a constant reminder that no matter how far I ran, the prophecy was inexorable. I found refuge in a decrepit motel on the edge of town, a place where the shadows seemed to whisper of forgotten sins. In the dim light of my room, I scrawled desperate notes, trying to piece together the fragments of my shattered existence. I scribbled warnings for anyone who might come after me, desperate to break the chain of predestined misery. But as I wrote, I felt an insidious presence watching me, a specter that hovered just beyond the flicker of my failing lamp. I dared not look up, terrified that I might see the face of my own fate staring back at me. One night, as a torrential downpour battered the world outside, I awoke to a deafening silence. The radio lay mute on the bedside table, its screen dark, its dials still. I hesitated, heart pounding, before reaching out to touch it. In that instant, the room was filled with a cold, ethereal wind that seemed to seep from the very walls. The silence shattered as the radio sprang to life, its screen displaying a single, stark message: "You cannot escape destiny." In that moment, I realized that my struggle was futile. The curse of the prophetic radio was not limited to the device. It had become a part of me, intertwined with my very soul. I understood that every attempt to defy fate only hastened the inevitable. As I stared at the glowing message, I felt my identity fragmenting into 1,000 pieces, each one reflecting the myriad horrors of a future already set in motion. A final twist, a revelation so shocking that it defied all reason, came to me in a flash of insight. The radio's curse had not been meant to doom me alone. It was a warning to the world. Each broadcast was a call to arms, a chance for those who dared to listen to rewrite their destiny. But the cost was immeasurable. For every life saved by heeding the warning, another was condemned to join the ranks of the cursed. I realized with crushing certainty that my own fate was the fulcrum upon which this balance of life and terror pivoted. I was the nexus of an ancient conflict between fate and free will, a battle that had been raging long before I was born. In the final moments of that stormy night, as I sat in the decaying solitude of the motel room, I knew that the prophecy had only just begun. The radio's voice, now distant and yet omnipresent, had become a part of the very air I breathed. I felt its power coursing through me, a dark energy that would forever bind my soul to the sinister legacy of the cursed device. I was left with a single horrifying realization: my struggle against fate was a battle already lost, and the world would soon bear the scars of a destiny that could never be undone. Even now, as I recount these events, I feel the pull of that eldritch force tugging at my mind. I remain a reluctant prophet of doom, a living testament to a curse that defies logic and reason. The radio spectral broadcast continues to echo in the silence of my thoughts, a reminder that every moment is preordained, every heartbeat a step toward the final, inevitable reckoning. What terrifies me most is not the events themselves, but the knowledge that they could happen to anyone. The cursed radio was not an isolated anomaly, it was a relic born of human despair, a harbinger of a fate that lingers in the shadows of our everyday lives. I now see the world with new eyes, aware of the hidden threads that connect us all to a destiny written in the echoes of a long-forgotten prophecy. So, I leave you with this unsettling truth. What if, somewhere in your home, an object of the past holds the power to unravel your future? What if the ordinary becomes a vessel for the extraordinary, a gateway to horror beyond imagining? The prophetic radio is more than just a cursed relic. It is a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and the inescapable truth that destiny is never truly in our control. I wonder, as I sit here in the dwindling light of another stormy evening, if anyone out there has ever encountered a sign that their fate was sealed long before they even knew it. Have you ever heard that chilling voice in the dark? Can you imagine the terror of knowing that every step you take is predestined by forces beyond your understanding? I ask you this not just as a cautionary tale, but as a desperate plea from a soul haunted by its own prophecy. The line between reality and nightmare has blurred irrevocably for me. And now, as the storm rages on outside my window, I am left with a final, unanswered question that I hope will echo in the depths of your mind long after this story ends. If you were faced with the unyielding certainty of a cursed destiny, would you try to change it, or would you surrender to the prophecy of the prophetic radio?